Alright.
I think we should, since we've been kind of alluding to it a lot, I think it's time we talk about Chapter 1-4.
I have it in A tier, borderline S tier.
That is precisely where I was going to put it. I was going to put it in A, and I was thinking about S, but I think a couple of things do hold it back. Most notably, the only, like, not the only thing, but, like, I don't like how Aoi was portrayed in this chapter. I understand why she was portrayed like that, and I don't doubt that she would act like that. And if anything, it's extremely believable. It is well written, and it is extremely within her character to do that. The problem is that this is a video game, and it causes like an hour of padding that didn't need to happen.
That doesn't really bother me.
That's why I'm keeping it in A tier, borderline S, because it comes across as like, you just wasted 2 hours of my life, thanks. But it makes sense for her, and that's why I don't fault it.
There was one joke I wanted to make when we were talking about 3-3. At the beginning of the trial, Tsumugi wastes everyone's time. We call that foreshadowing. I do not regret stopping the flow of the video to say that.
I mean, it needed to be said. But yeah, that's probably my biggest problem with Chapter 4. It's just that
it's also my biggest problem, but
it feels too padded. And I really should clarify this. When I say that it's my biggest problem, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that I particularly hate about it. It's just something that I don't think is as good.
Yeah.
It's the worst thing in a collection of good things.
Right.
Because, like I said, the reason that Aoi does that, the reason that she tries to mess everyone up, it's within her character. It's very believable. There's a clear reason why she does this. She has a clear motivation, and it's not unreasonable to think that a character like Hina would do that. So it makes sense.
And I think we can both agree, probably, that Sakura's motive for committing suicide is probably the best motive in the series.
I agree. I honestly agree. I think her motive is the best in the series.
It's up there with the other two Case 4s, neither of which we've gotten to yet.
Yeah, but I do think it's better than both of those. And I think what's better, I think what makes it better than both of those is that it's not a situational thing, unlike those, because they were driven to do it based on their current and immediate circumstances. Sakura did it because of the bigger picture.
Yeah, you can't
fault her for that.
You can't really relate to the motives in the other two.
Because you've never been in that situation before.
Yeah.
But you can imagine yourself in the position that Sakura is in, and yeah, if I was in her situation, I'd want to kill myself too. It would be the more painless thing to do based on what's coming, and it's honorable for what she did. Like, I'm not saying like, yeah, if you're ever in a bad spot, go kill yourself, but like, it's very relatable to agree with why she did what she did.
The simplicity is one of the best things about it for me.
I agree, and here's why. Because there's so much setup going into the investigation that it like trains you to believe there's no way it's that simple. Like you can kind of piece together that she killed herself pretty early on, and as soon as I found the body and knew that it was a locked room, I kind of immediately knew, oh, this is a suicide. But
especially when Kyoko doesn't bring up that possibility.
Yeah. It's something where, like, the game is very clearly pointing you in that direction from the start, and they make it so abundantly clear that that's where it's going. But at the same time, they spend so much time leaving a trail that leads to something else. And it's not a trail that somebody forged, either. Except in Aoi's case, but we already talked about that. I'm talking about, it was Hero, who was the other one?
Toko.
Oh, Toko. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, like, it's not padding because somebody's trying to fuck with you. It's padding because somebody genuinely thought that they did it and were scared. As anyone would be if you thought you accidentally killed somebody. Like,
yeah,
it's one of those things where, like, yes, it is unnecessary padding, but put yourself in their situation. You hit somebody over the head and they fell over and are unresponsive, and you know that if you get caught in this situation, you're going to be executed. What do? You do the same frickin' thing.
I love how simple it is, also because in this chapter in particular, the character dynamics are at an all-time high.
I agree. I honestly agree. And this is something I was talking about the other day.
Everyone just kind of hates each other, except Sakura, who loves everyone because she's great. Honestly, my favorite character from 1.
I wouldn't put her as my top character. I still like Chihiro, but Sakura's up there.
Yeah.
And this is something I was talking about in my server the other day, of like how Danganronpa 1, I think, does character dynamics better than any other game in the series. Mostly just because
I agree with that.
Everybody, they're not split up into cliques like they are in 2 and V3. And they are kind of split up into groups, like Toko and Byakuya are kind of always lumped together. Chihiro and Mondo have a lot going on there. Taka and Mondo, obviously. And then, like, Kyoko and Makoto. But here's the difference between Danganronpa 1 and the other games in the series. In the other games, those pairings or groups don't really mix around. In the first game, they do. A lot. And that's very clear in Chapter 4. Very clear. Because just about everybody is talking with everybody in that chapter. There's no 2 characters that never say a word to each other. They're all talking collectively. And that's something that Danganronpa 1 does better than the other games in general, but Chapter 4 especially.
The way Makoto is integrated into these dynamics, you don't really see the same thing in other games with the protagonist.
And I feel like a lot of that is because in the other games there's like pairings kind of that go along with the protagonist. Like you have sidekicks in the other games. In the first game, the closest thing you have to a sidekick is Kyoko, and that's not really until the end. Like the very end.
Well, she's your sidekick kind of throughout the game, but because she's so, like, distant...
She's not as in-your-face and hand-holdy as the others are. Whereas in
Chiaki and Kaito?
Because Chiaki and Kaito, there's a moment in almost every chapter where they're like, oh, Hajime or Shuichi knows, tell them. Kyoko doesn't do that. She just says...
Even Byakuya does that, and he's not even the sidekick.
Yeah, you're right, he does. But like,
also, I love this chapter because of the way that Kyoko interacts with Byakuya during the trial.
I agree.
Byakuya has no clue what's going on, and Kyoko just spells it out painfully slowly in front of him. And saying, wow, it's really unlike you for you to have missed such an important clue.
I especially love that because it's an instance of a character being a complete jackass and it being turned on them. Because he does the same thing to you for something that you could not have known.
Yeah. But
he like chastises for not knowing shit that only he could have figured out. And then like
for not knowing shit that he could have easily known.
Yeah. It's a great moment.
Good.
It's great. It's phenomenal. But yeah, chapter 4 is good.
And of course there's the reveal at the end where Alter Ego, yeah, he gets bulldozed.
Yeah. That happened. That was actually like genuinely surprising to me the first time I played it.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking this whole chapter, I'm like, I know this is a suicide, but what the hell they're gonna do for the finale of the chapter? They gotta do something. But that caught me off guard because they don't allude to the fact that Monokuma even knows about him. Like they don't even hint at that. If anything, it's implied that he doesn't know about it. So when it's revealed in that split moment of, oh god, he knows, it's genuinely shocking.
We got 5 left.
All right, I think since we've been talking about it before, I think I want to talk about chapter 1 of V3, and because we were talking about like the whole sidekick thing, and we were talking about the whole sidekick thing before, and I feel like the sidekick, I don't want to call it a mechanic, but like that trope of your protagonist being guided along by a certain character almost works in that chapter's favor. Because they're still doing it. You just don't know which one of them is the protagonist.
The way I think about it is in a similar vein to chapter 2, but without the problems.
That's fair.
I
do think there are some problems. I
was just gonna say, it's a mostly bare bones case with a few things about it that are really great, and that's why I have it in A tier.
I think I'm gonna put it in B tier, and there is a reason. Before I explain that, let me ask you, did you know the major twist of this chapter before you played it?
No, but I did sort of catch on to it before they got there.
When did you catch on? And let me make very clear that this is very important to what I'm about to say. When you figured that out is vital to whether or not you had this problem.
I was just doing the investigation, and in another server, someone said the killer is kind of obvious, and then I started thinking about it, and I thought, wait a minute, I know who it is, and I was right.
So my question is, did you figure it out before you started the trial?
I did.
Okay. That kind of impacts things, but as a whole, not really. My biggest problem with this chapter is that if you know that, the dialogue makes no sense at all. There is no indication whatsoever that Kaede is the one planning and executing this murder. If anything, there is dialogue that goes against this. Because I get that the whole point of this twist was so that it's something unexpected. You don't expect them to kill off the protagonist. And as such, you have to kind of take precautions so that the player doesn't see it coming. The problem
Even
with
the tags in the game on Steam says female protagonist.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. It's like everything else is so clever. Her being like front and center on the box art, the Steam tags, like all of the promotional material leading up to the game, that's all brilliant. And the way that they subverted that is brilliant. The problem is that they didn't subvert the text leading up to that, because there are numerous lines, like multiple instances, of Kaede saying, I don't know what's going on. Who could have done this? And she's not saying it in general. She's like, this is her internal thoughts. Like, of course she would know. She did it! And if you know that while you're reading this text, it stands out really badly, because you're just like, what do you mean? What do you mean who could have done something so awful? What do you mean how could one of us have been a murderer? What do you mean who could have gone through with this plan? You're the one who did all these things, you should know!
Now that you've said that, I've moved it down to my B tier. Because I did not think of that. I did not think about that.
It's something I didn't even think about when I played it for the first time, but I started watching Lukagen's Let's Play of that game, And since I had already played it, I knew it was going to happen, and every time Kaede said one of those things, and she says it a lot, like, especially during the build-up, like, when she's going to, like, I think she hints at the shot put ball being a weapon at some point. And, like, I think the way she says it is just like, man, I couldn't do something like this, or something along those lines. And you're just like, but you do. You actually do. So this text makes no sense. That's my biggest problem with Chapter 1 of V3. I think the build-up and everything going into this chapter is absolutely brilliant. It's almost perfect if you're playing it blind, but if you know how it ends, a lot of things don't make sense.
Right. Okay, we have 4 left, and the one that we both agree is pretty much the best. I want to leave that for last.
I agree.
So let's talk about 2-5.
2-5, okay. That's an interesting case. Oh my god. So Nagito's fucking insane. I think we can all agree on that. I can't decide whether that or Ryoma is my favorite body discovery, but it's a close battle. It's between those two.
For me, it's like the most fucked up one. Like, you see that he's dead with a big ass spear through his chest, and then it just pans over to everything else that's in there.
It's one of those, like, I knew you were fucked up, but Jesus Christ, dude, moments.
I mean, like, at the time, you don't even know that it was him who did all of that to himself. Like, you just see the camera pans over into a close-up of his arm being slashed open, his legs being slashed open, he's tied up at the ends of 3 of his limbs. There's a big ass spear through his chest, and he looks terrified with duct tape over his mouth, and you're just like,
I think we can all agree that this is by far it wouldn't be the most graphic in person. If this was not animated, Ryomo's definitely would have been the most graphic. But never in the rest of the series do they do this amount of outright mutilation. It is very graphic. There is a lot of bodily harm going on there. And it's actually, not for me, I can stomach these kind of things pretty well, but for people who can't handle blood, that's probably something that's really hard to look at. It's pretty disturbing how mutilated he is.
I know you said that the thing that drags it down for you is the way they integrated his luck into the murder.
It's a Deus Ex Machina, oh my god. I don't... Okay. Here's the thing, I get that that's his whole point, but there comes a time where I have to stop, like, suspending my disbelief, because, like, okay, I can get the whole, like, drawing the stick thing. That I can understand, but, like... And, like, all the other little luck things throughout the rest of the game, too. There are plenty other examples of that. But this is going a bit far.
Actually, I don't really agree. If you just think about it from a standpoint of what the odds of it are, the odds of him getting picked for cleaning duty are 1 in 16. The odds of Chiaki being the one who throws the poison fire grenade is 1 in 6, probably higher because, taking her personality into account, she is very actively against trying to let anything bad happen, so she would probably be throwing more fire grenades than anyone else.
I can kind of see that. My issue is that if he had figured that out, then his motivation doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because the whole point was to create an unsolvable murder, right? Like an unprovable murder. But if he's counting on his luck, that means he knows who did it. So either he got bullshit lucky, or his murder wasn't unsolvable to begin with. It's one of the two, and either way, I don't really think it works. Everything else about this chapter, though, is fantastic. I will give it that.
basically Nagito is completely, like, he knows that his luck is like the only thing he has, and it's always worked out for him so far. Like, if you listen to all the dialogue, like, he says a lot of things that are just like a lot of bullshit lucky things that has happened to him. So he has to just trust his luck and assume that the traitor is the one who would throw the grenade, because it doesn't make sense for it to be anyone else in his eyes.
All right, here's another question, and this might just be me missing things. I'm completely aware of that. But do they ever explain why the whole trap he sets of, like, scanning the handbooks doesn't work? Because Chiaki's literally the first one to do that, and nothing happens. Do they ever explain that? Was he just bullshitting?
Yeah, he was just bullshitting.
Okay. So then what was the point of that?
He wanted to, hopefully, to try and get the traitor to just, like, reveal themselves to him before he had to go to the drastic measures that he did.
Okay, that's fair. I just don't remember if it was ever explicitly stated that he was bullshitting, or if they just forgot about that.
I don't think it was explicitly stated, but it's very easy to figure out.
That's what I was thinking. I kind of assumed he was bullshitting, but they never said it, so I wasn't sure. And you know how these games like to spell everything out.
Yeah, Danganronpa doesn't really get subtlety.
Yeah. But, man, despite the problems I have with it...
Do you agree with it being up there?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I don't think I'm gonna put it in S. I do think it has issues, but very much A tier. Easily. Because the build-up leading up to this chapter, I think, is probably the best in the series. Of Nagito completely losing his mind, the bomb threat, that was phenomenally well done. Like, scrambling across the islands with a time limit, that was insane. And the stakes are so high in this chapter before anything actually happens. And I think that's part of what makes it so good, is that it's... A lot of Danganronpa chapters have a problem where they have, like, the whole free time segments where not a lot is really going on, but 2-5 is... It is crazy start to finish, because Nagito's always doing something drastic. It's never boring.
One thing I like about the bomb scare part is that Hajime isn't the one who actually finds them.
That's another thing I really like, because there's... I think I mentioned this another time.
It adds a bit more realism to it.
Because, like, what are the odds of the same person discovering the dangerous thing every single time?
It's like in the same vein as the body discovery announcement.
And how the protagonist is always involved.
Yeah, where you are not the one who finds the body for the third time.
Yeah.
Instead, it's just Kazuichi who's not involved.
Yeah, because that's something that I was gonna bring up in my server a couple days ago. I'm just like, you ever notice how the protagonist is always the one that finds the body? And then I remembered the one time they didn't do that, and I'm just like, I remember liking that, because it adds another sense of realism to it, which is weird to be saying about the same chapter where Nagito has bullshit luck, but I rest my case.
It's probably the least bullshit out of all his lucky moments. I'm just gonna say that.
His luck in general is bullshit, and it's kind of a writer's trick, but...
But I think that out of all the times...
It's definitely not the worst example of it.
Yeah. Though, I think the worst example was the cleaning duty thing.
Yeah, the odds of that are pretty damn low.
I can't believe it's taken us this long to talk about 1-6.
Yeah. Okay, look. Here's something I think that makes the first game probably my favorite overall of the three. It's the only game that could have ended where it did, and I would have been okay with it.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing about the first game. It does have a lot of plot threads that are never cleared up. It does have a lot of loose ends. It has a lot of suspense that builds up into questions that are never answered. Here's the thing. All of the questions in Danganronpa 1 that are left unanswered are ones that would benefit from not being answered at all. Because they're questions that are meant to be left open-ended. It's one of those situations where there's a difference between leaving your ending open-ended and up to interpretation and ending on a cliffhanger. Everything else ends on a cliffhanger. If the series ended with Danganronpa 1, it wouldn't have been a cliffhanger. It would have just been open to interpretation. Because it doesn't really matter what the answers to those questions are, because the whole point of it was about moving forward. Right. That was like the message of the game. It's about taking the situation you're in and making the best of it, getting through to the end, and looking to what's in the future for you. That's the whole point. And not knowing what the future holds strengthens that message. So I feel like if the sequels never happened and Danganronpa was just a one-game thing, Chapter 6 would have been a lot better than it is.
I personally have it in D tier just because I think it feels really underwhelming.
I can agree with that. I understand why. That's not my primary reason. My primary reason is the fact that I think the ending of 1 is kind of ruined by the fact that sequels exist.
Right. That bothers me as well, but it's more so just the fact that I've sort of gotten conditioned to be used to endings that are just a lot more grandiose.
Yeah, you expect a big finale, and the first game really doesn't have that.
Finale. We both fucking hate the finale of V3, and we don't like the finale of 2, but they were big.
They were, yes, I agree. They were a big scale. It was horrible, but they did go all out.
Yes.
The first game doesn't really go all out. It's just kind of another trial.
Yeah.
It's not any lesser than the others, but it's just another trial. It's not any bigger.
It doesn't really feel enough like an ending to justify being the ending. Yes,
that's a very good way of wording it. It just feels like they needed to wrap things up, so this is how they chose to do it. Not much fanfare, and that's it.
Right.
It's not a bad thing, but it definitely leaves a taste of that's it.
Yeah.
So, like it's not necessarily that it's bad. It's just kind of there's not much here to talk about.
They put all the tension in there, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really amount to that much.
Yeah, it's good at what it does, but it doesn't try to do anything more than that. And because of that, it ends up just kind of feeling like missed potential. But that's pretty much its biggest flaw. Other than that, it's kind of fine.
And that leaves us with the unanimous agreement that Danganronpa does not know how to end their games.
They really don't. The closest thing to a satisfying conclusion the series has is the final episode of Danganronpa 3. It's the closest thing. And
okay.
I have my problems with that too, but it's at least more of a big... It is a big grand finale, and it's one that isn't completely bullshit and insulting.
Let's talk about... there's only 2 left. Let's talk about the one from... I think it's the most popular one from V3, actually.
Is it really? I would have thought 5 was. I would have thought 5 was the most popular.
I see a lot more people praising Chapter 4.
That's interesting. I agree that it's good. It's not my favorite. But I will say this much, and this is a big statement coming from me. If you know me personally, if you know what kind of person I am, this might sound genuinely surprising. V3-4 is the only time in any video game I've ever played where I had to take an emotional break. I never do that. games can be very emotional, and I very much enjoy emotional games. I love games like Mother 3, The Last of Us, Xenoblade. I love games that tell an emotional story, ones that impact me. But it's very rare, very, very rare, for those feelings to physically overwhelm me. V3-4 is the only time ever in my entire life playing a video game where I had to stop because I felt like I actually couldn't handle it. That's saying a lot.
This is a really big moment. I feel like I shouldn't be here.
But, like, for real, like, this actually, like, legitimately got to me. And a lot of that is because, and I know we've said it before, but fucking hell, I love Gonta. He is the most precious bean. He is the goodest boy. And I love him. And that's a thing that's, like, universal between the two of us. We both just love him because he's such a likable character. But to me, personally, he's very relatable because I'm mildly autistic, for those of you who don't know. And when put in high-pressure situations, I'm quick to break. I panic. And when I panic, I don't think clearly, and my brain kind of just shuts down. That's what Gonta does when presented with this information. He's essentially presented with a situation where he knew he fucked up, he knew he did something wrong, but he didn't mean to, and when that realization hits him, it shatters him. He breaks down. He's crying. He is sobbing. He is freaking out. He is begging for people to tell him it's not true, begging for forgiveness. And he is sitting there like he is a broken man pleading for things to turn out okay. That is what I'm like when I'm having a meltdown. I panic, I freak out, and I lose it. I don't have the ability to think. I lose any... On top of just losing composure, I lose my ability to process information. And watching that happen to another character is something that hit me really hard, because I've been there. And I know that in his situation, I would probably react the same way. I would probably panic, I would probably freak out, and my mind would probably just shut down and kind of stop taking in information. So it was a very relatable and very emotionally impactful moment to me. And it's the only time in a video game I've ever felt like this is a lot to take in. I need to take a break.
I think it goes without saying that I did not have the same experience. I had a very small version of that experience.
It's something that I think everyone can relate to on some level, because we've all been in this situation where we're stressed out, we don't know what's going on, and we just kind of like stop thinking for a while, like we need to recuperate, and we just kind of break down, because it's human nature. We can only handle so much. Emotionally, there's only so much a person can take. I think that's something that everybody can relate to. It's just something that I relate to especially hard because I have disabilities that make it twice as hard for me to do that as it does for normal people who already break under those circumstances. So to me, it was just like, it was 10 times more relatable. It was still relatable to other people, but it was like looking in a mirror to me.
For me, it's not just because of that, it's also because it's the only time where you have to outright use video game logic to figure out the murder.
That's another thing I think really helps this chapter. It's very clever. It's very clever.
It is very clever. But the thing that really makes it hit home for me is it's one thing that it does easily better than any other trial in the series, at least in my opinion, and that is the voice acting.
Yes, honestly, that is, I think, I'll have to honestly go back and replay this one, because I was probably so mentally broken at the time that that stuff like that probably didn't even really cross my mind about why I felt so strongly like that. But now that I'm looking back on it, my god, it's so good. Gonta's mental breakdown, like, it sounds like the voice actor is having a mental breakdown in the studio. It is so believable. He sold it. He really sold it. It's and every other character also sells it in this chapter, but Gonta especially.
Kokichi.
Yeah, Kokichi does it really well too.
Like the way he just starts going into like a screaming fit at people.
Yes. Like Kaito's screaming fits, Gonta's actual like sounds like legitimate sobbing. Kokichi's whatever the hell Kokichi is. They all feel like it's one of those moments where the voice acting is so good that you almost forget that these are digital characters. They really, really sell their characters here.
Sorry, that noise was just like a physical reaction I have when I remember V3's finale.
Honestly, same.
The reason why I don't have it in S tier is because everything that precedes the trial is not that good.
Yeah, I agree. And I was telling you about that kind of before you started. I was telling you, like, the trial itself, just the trial, is one of the best in the series, but until you get there, it's pretty tedious. Because, like, while I do like the virtual world thing, virtual world, while I love that, and I love the concept of it,
I definitely agree.
It's very tedious, and because of that,
so
I think that keeps it from being an S tier. It's very slow paced. It takes a lot to do anything, and there's a lot of walking back and forth, very slowly.
And I am usually not someone who really minds when a game takes things slow, but the virtual world, it is
agonizingly slow. Like it's just like, it's not that you're waiting for something to happen, because something is obviously happening, and it's interesting what's happening, but just like, it's basically Diamond and Pearl. It's that problem. What's going on here is good, but it's so slow.
Is that it?
I think that about covers it. I put it in A.
Yeah, me too.
That slowness is the only thing keeping it from being, like, almost perfect.
Okay. There's only one left. The grand finale.
Instant S tier. Danganronpa 2-4 is the best chapter in the series.
Absolutely.
The setting is fucking brilliant. I cannot understate that. The atmosphere in this is, it's basically V3-3, but without the creepiness. It's just as mysterious, if not more so. It's got the same element of, we don't know what the rules are of this world as V3-4. It's got that same element, except, in my opinion, done better because it's not slow as hell. The setting itself is super memorable. It's actually kind of tricky to figure out if you don't know. And without some hints, I don't think I would have figured it out. It's a genuine puzzle. It's an actual puzzle that you have to figure out, and it's well done.
Right.
The motivation is excellent. This is, if we're judging the motivations based on how well we think they would work from Monokuma's perspective, this is the smartest one by far. Literally starving them out.
Yeah.
It's either one of you kills somebody, or you're all slowly and painfully gonna starve to death, and it's not gonna be pleasant.
And also, I love all the little things they get in the trial. Like how in the second sequence of free time events, they don't actually play the free time music.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of little touches like that too.
Instead, they play the same. Instead, they play the same one in the scene at the end of 2-5, where it's like Chiaki and Monami holding hands and waving goodbye to everyone.
Yeah, that's right. Man, there's so much to love about this chapter.
It just hits every right note.
And none of the bad ones.
thing I never hear people bring up about this one is that every character gets to do something. It's
Everyone in this situation is crucial to this case, and while we're on that note, we talked about this before, like prior to recording this video, but Gundam is, without question, no contest, but the smartest killer in the series. He got caught because of a random fucking chance. Something that nobody could have predicted, and if that alarm did not go off, which was completely unprecedented, like nobody could have known that, nobody could have predicted it, nobody could have set that up to catch him intentionally. If it was not for that random ass coincidence, he would not have been caught. That is the only thing.
As well as the fact that I already loved Gundam as a character before going into the chapter.
I was pretty on him actually. I liked him, but I kind of felt the same way as I did with Himiko. I was just like, all right, you can dial it back a little now. Please bring it back to reality a little bit. Not as bad as Himiko, especially in chapter 2, but I did kind of feel that way about him. But the longer the game went on, I realized how much more human he was than he let on. And I really started to like him. And that was especially clear in this chapter.
This chapter where...
it almost completely humanizes him.
Yeah. Where it's implied, like it's not explicitly stated because he denies it, but it's pretty clear that he basically sacrifices himself as well as...
He never explicitly says it, and like, I forget we were talking about before how they don't always spell everything out, but this is another instance of that, where it's something that the series usually tries to hammer in and really beat it into your head. This is the message, this is what's going on, this is how things worked, but it is heavily implied that Gundam most likely would have admitted to the crime before the voting to save everyone, but he never says it. It's heavily implied that he would have probably given himself up because he didn't want to die himself, but he didn't want the others to die either, and he never explicitly says that. But you can kind of tell based on like how he dodges around it that he probably would have.
It also has one of my favorite investigations, not just because of like the clues themselves, but also you play as Nagito. Yes,
I almost forgot about that. By the way, you didn't have this experience, but I did. I played the Zero Escape trilogy before playing Danganronpa, so I was very happy when I saw that.
Yeah. I just love escape rooms in general, so getting to that part, I was like, all right, this is
I already loved escape rooms, but like the Zero Escape trilogy is one of my favorite series in gaming, and having played that going into it, I'm just like, they knew. They knew, and I love it.
They did know.
Between the character interactions, basically everyone being important, the motive being very relatable and understandable. There's nothing bad about this chapter. There's really nothing it does wrong.
It just does everything right.
It really does. It's the only chapter in the entire series I think I legitimately cannot think of a fault. I can't think of anything this chapter does wrong.
I cannot come up with a single thing that I don't like about this chapter, which is not true for literally every other chapter in the series.
Even the other S tiers here, like chapter 2 and 1 and 5 in V3, while the execution of them is phenomenal, there are things that keep them from being perfect. 2-4 is basically perfect. I can't think of anything wrong with it. So yeah, that's our tier list of Danganronpa chapters based mostly on the cases.
For 3 hours.
Have we been here? I don't know. What time did we start? It's 7:48.
I think like around 4:45.
Oof. But yeah, anyway, yeah, that's our ranking of the Danganronpa trials. We more or less have a general agreement. There's a couple that we disagree on, like 5 in 2 and chapter 3 in V3. Although the difference between those is that while I personally like V3-3, I will admit that it does have flaws and they are not good. Like, the flaws in it are very obvious. They're just flaws that don't personally bother me. But on an objective level, I definitely understand why everyone else doesn't really like it.
It's a similar thing with me and 2-5. I get that you think that the luck thing was bullshit, but like when I compare it to all the other instances of this happening,
it's not that it suddenly makes it work. It doesn't really forgive the bullshit, but it puts the bullshit into perspective. If that makes any sense.
And you just look at the bullshit and you're like,
okay, all of this is bullshit, not just this one thing.
And you're like, yeah, you know what? Maybe I should direct my anger to literally anything else.
Let's direct our anger to V3-6. Literally the only moment in any game I've ever played that legitimately kind of ruins a franchise.
Are we gonna go back to ranting about that?
No, I think we've covered that pretty well. How we both vehemently despise.
Didn't we spend like the first half hour of this video?
That was the longest part of this video by far. But it needed to be. People needed to hear that.
It needed to be said.
It really did. Anyway, yeah. If you guys like this kind of video, let me know in the comments below. Me and Temp actually have a couple more of these planned already. So, regardless, you're more than likely going to get another one of these or another couple of these. Depends on what we feel like doing. We both really like Danganronpa. I've been looking for an excuse to talk about it on YouTube for quite a while now, because I can't really do a non-blind Let's Play of a game like this. But, man, it's a fun series to talk about. There's a lot to uncover, a lot to discuss, and it's a very fun series to bring up in these kind of contexts. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next one of these and whatever I decide to do next. Temp, is there anything you want to say before I stop recording?
No.
Okay, bye.